Welcome back, everybody, to the ND and Free podcast in partnership with the Awareness Space, a podcast and media platform that explores how NDers can live their truth and feel free in their lives. We hear from inspiring coaches, therapists, experts, and fellow NDers from all over the world. I'm Owen Morgan, a self-awareness coach and ADHD coach, and I have over 10 years experience in the well-being sector, and I've interviewed over 500 people, it's probably 600 by now, across 4 podcasts, and I received my ADHD diagnosis at 41, and it changed my life forever. My mission is to explore how the human spirit and understanding our whole self can bring us a life full of possibilities. So I'm excited today. We have an absolutely amazing guest. We have talked so much before coming on the show today, so it's going to feel really, really good, and I hope that is picked up in our conversation today. On the Neurodivergent Friday Guide show, we have Philippa Balazs. Philippa is a Kent-based AuDHD therapist and advocate. She runs a thriving practice, Flourish with Philippa, where she specialises in late diagnosis, high masking women, and supporting ND parents with ND kids. Finally, welcome to the show, Philippa. I'm so excited to I know you already, but excited to get to know you and tap into that wonderful brain of yours.
Thank you so much, Owen, and thank you for having me on the show. It's my podcasting debut, and I'm really excited. And yeah, can't wait to see what's going to come out of the show today. Thank you for my lovely intro and my beautiful pronunciation of my tricky surname.
That's right, you warned me, which I'm very grateful for. I don't make too many errors like that, but you saved me just to be sure. But
Thank you,
yeah, what I really love about this journey is how many people I've had come on who haven't done it before, and that feels really, really special. So I always dream of you, like my podcast child, going off into the world and doing all these other shows. But there she is, the new launch of podcast. Who knows where it may lead? But funnily enough, this Monday I did a little webinar about AuDHD, for clients that may appear. So to have an AuDHD therapist on the show is incredible because it's complex. Maybe it's hard to unpack at times, but we'll touch a little bit on that today. But we're touching on misophonia today and emotions generally across the board, bottom up experiences, things like that. But give us some context. We had your bio there, but give us some context about what you offer the neurodivergent community, how that looks, how you practice, all those sorts of things. Give us some context.
Yeah, so I trained as a general counselor. Well, all training courses are kind of general courses. And I knew about my neurodivergence when I was training. So it wasn't like something I discovered recently. I was diagnosed as a child. So I kind of had it in the background when I was training, but it was only when I started getting loads of neurodivergent clients in my placement, and my supervisors and people kept saying, "Oh, you're doing such amazing work with this client group. Have you considered, niching, or are you thinking about doing that when you qualify?" And I genuinely hadn't. I thought I would probably just be a general counselor, just with general kind of, anxiety, depression, all those types of things. And then when I set up Flourish with Philippa, I kind of put the list of all the things that I have, experience with ASD and ADHD were at the top. And I just started getting loads of inquiries of people saying, I've been recently diagnosed, et cetera, et cetera. And getting a lot of interest in that. And I wasn't transparent about my own neurodivergence in the beginning. I had quite a bit of trepidation around being kind of open and honest about that. And I got myself a neurodivergent supervisor, and she said to me, why aren't you being kind of honest about your own neurodivergence? And I didn't know why. I think I have this maybe slightly kind of traditional training and traditional therapy, or I did have, rather, not anymore, but I had this traditional idea that all self-disclosure was really bad and that no one should know anything about the therapist, because that's the kind of therapy I've had over the years. So, for the best part of maybe sort of 17 years, I've had loads of different therapists and know virtually nothing about any of them. So I think I carried that with me in a really strong way, that you shouldn't self-disclose. But it became really obvious that in order to be really congruent, really authentic, to model what I am, what clients are wanting to work with, which is being authentic and living authentically, how can I really get them to lean into that if I'm not doing that myself. So I kind of took the leap and I started self-disclosing, and then obviously kind of built my social media page and things like that, and now I'm really comfortable with it. But initially it was, yeah, it was hard. I felt really exposed and I wasn't sure what the reactions would be for that or what that would even look like.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you touched on something really powerful there, which is how to know what the therapeutic relationship should look like. So much of our connection comes from this authentic resonance, I suppose. And if you don't know anything about the person that's helping you, it's just like there's a human here that's fantastic at listening and holding a safe space, but there's something missing, where the relatability, but then relatability can be a bit dangerous in a professional way. So it's a hard one. I don't know how therapists specifically and counselors do it. Obviously, with coaching, it's much more widespread that you're allowed to do TikToks and
Mm.
just be just like, this is how I struggle, and this is how I've done it. Come on in and I'll help you with it. It's a weird one. And I know you might be thinking about going down the coaching route on top of everything you're doing. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that's going to feel for you. But it feels like you're already seeing that kind of relatability and authenticity through um, knowing a little bit about each other. I don't know. It's hard. What are your thoughts? I'm not sure if I'm making sense there.
Yeah, no, you are. I think, really the landscape of therapy has changed so much in the last sort of 10 years. I think since social media and technology and all, everything. Like when I started out having therapy kind of in the mid 2000s, before social media, there was a really distinct kind of separation between therapy and that kind of personal world. And I think they do bleed into each other now, and I guess in some ways, yeah, that can be a bad thing. If you know too much about your therapist. I've got a disclaimer on my Instagram saying, I'm an advocate for the ND community. You will find out things about me on here that you wouldn't find out in the therapy room, but we can discuss that if that's something that it does come up in session. If a client does follow me or does see my social media, that's something we can talk about. So yeah, they've absolutely blended so much that there's, almost no separation between this sort of psychoeducation and therapy that you see on TikTok and Instagram that you would get in the room with me. So yeah, does that make sense?
It does, it does. And I think there's a line, isn't it? There's a boundary you can set, maybe, our children aren't on our social media and there's a division there. I think if it's all everything, I think that would be very problematic. But I think it's just knowing that perfect boundary of who you are as a personal being and the amazing work that you hope to be providing. So I think you just sit somewhere there, don't you, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being boundaried about the things that I share. I think I have to always be thinking, is this something that I'm okay with the client knowing about me? Could this potentially be damaging in any way? Would a client feel really uncomfortable? And that consistency across how they experience me in the room and how they experience me online, I think it has to be the same, that there shouldn't be a difference in the way that I am in the authenticity and congruence that I bring on both spaces.
Yeah, and I guess in many ways, making sure that they're not in any way having to hold a space for you. So if
Yeah.
they've really got to know you on there and you start talking about things that are in the content, and then you start to get to know each other in that way, you may then, it'd be very random, but accidentally slip into, it's been a tricky day. For
Yeah.
example, you'd say that. Absolutely not. So it's knowing, I think that is the number one boundary is that you're not going in and it's a bit like a child, the child should never have to adjust how they're being so you feel better within yourself, if that makes sense. And I think it's the same with client work, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think parenting is a big one for that. It's like the child shouldn't be helping you with your emotional state, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I definitely see a lot of that. That's the themes that come through client work are, children that have taken on way too much, way too soon in their life and spend years kind of with the consequences of that. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. I could talk to you all day about this
I
this
know,
this
yeah, separate
dynamic.
podcast maybe.
So well, let's move on. But no, thank you so much. So I think it's kind of clear why you'd be working with neurodivergent people from what you said there. But there's something you said to me when we first met, which online, which was really incredible, is that you were so early. You were like back in the day, maybe one of the first to be diagnosed when there was none of this. There was no podcasting. or anything talking about this kind of stuff. So I guess at the time, then back then, your response to a diagnosis would just be like it would have been then, in isolation, not knowing too much what it meant. Was that a time where people actually then did loads of research and figured out how to help themselves, or was it more like, oh, okay, I've got that, and that was it, or was
Yeah.
that deep work done?
Not really. I mean, we're going back. So I was diagnosed in 1996, which, I'm not that young. So I was 9. So we're going back 30 years. And I tried to get some kind of statistics on it, of like how many people were diagnosed around that time, and females as well. And I think it's something like 50 women were diagnosed in total up to like that point. So I think I'm like one in the first 50 females, and I got the dual diagnosis together. So that was unheard of. It really was. And the pediatrician who conducted the assessment, and psychologist, he was Australian, and he came over from Australia, and I think they were quite ahead of the time, the head of the curve. And he came over and kind of offered his expertise, and it's been worded as, dealing with problem children. So you really had to be an outlier to get a referral to this kind of specialist clinic back then. And I think, I'm not late diagnosed, but I work with late diagnosed people almost exclusively, actually. And I often feel late diagnosed because I didn't understand what any of that meant. When I was 9, that was something that was done to me, not something that I sought out to understand myself better. I didn't, I think when you're late diagnosed, you have that autonomy, don't you? You have that choice. It's something that you want to understand about yourself that explains lots of things and gives you answers. But I think when I was a child, I just existed in my own world, and it was done to me. And not to be cruel, but in a way that it was very pathologizing. There was no neurodiversity language. This was pre-neurodiversity movement in 2001 that kind of started. So the kind of terminology that I heard was deficit, challenging, difficult behavior, problem behavior, lots of very problematic and pathologizing language, which as a 9-year-old you absorb. So that becomes part of your identity. It became part of my identity that I'm a problem. And so I carried that with me for years, but nobody ever really saying to me, oh, all those difficulties that you had in your teenage years and in your early 20s and in your 20s. Yeah, it's because of your ADHD and your autism. Like no one ever kind of like reinforced the diagnosis and was like, okay, let's help you understand it. It was just kind of plonked there and then left. And so I couldn't properly kind of integrate that into my identity until really recently. And it was part of my counseling training and working with neurodivergent clients where I've been able to go, oh my God, I have to lean into this now. This is who I am too. And does that make sense? So I feel kind of late diagnosed because of the journey that I've had and because of the way that it happened when I was younger and the world we lived in. The world just wasn't ready to receive neurodivergence back then. So you had to just get on with it. And there was no Senkos, no nothing in school. So you just carried on like nothing had happened.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I kind of, it's interesting because, we're similar age. So just thinking about, what school used to be like for us and how that population of people will be put in the hut at the bottom of the field there. A little rickety old hut as well. They wouldn't really come to normal sessions, but it was one extreme. There was us lot, and then the high end need of autism, for example. ADHD wasn't really much mentioned at all, I don't think, in sort of my school years. But it was just an autism, and it was at the highest level, and that was it. So I think over time we've had to really unpack it and see the levels of the spectrum and how that all looks.
Yeah.
But I think there's something you said that was interesting, that you felt you're kind of like, where myself and some of the people that I've met that late diagnosed, you're kind of in the same sort of timeline pattern as we are. But I do wonder, without sticking around too long on the question, is I've met people since my diagnosis who say, oh my God, the old, oh my God, the traditional, I have that too. But a lot of them are really happy. They've got a great relationship and they've got a great job that they've obviously fallen into, and the ND's been allowed to flourish in it. So they don't need to go and get a diagnosis. They don't need, so they're like, I probably am, but I'm good, until maybe one day they're not good, or maybe they're good for the rest of their life. But I think the diagnosis only matters if it's in that there's something about your experience of life that's really you're struggling with, and it's going to provide you with a pathway maybe to hope. So I guess it doesn't even matter when it was diagnosed, it's only when it matters that the presentations affect your life too. And being championed is also, I mean, away from all of this, it's very powerful for a child to feel championed by a caregiver. So I mean, hopefully that has helped you develop as well in the process, ironically, alongside. So that's really powerful. And we can advocate now. All us NDs now can advocate for our children. For my stepson's going for assessment literally this week, and my partner's neurodivergent as well. So what a journey all three of us can go on together, to
Exactly.
all accept each other for who we are. Beautiful.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, no, you're all speaking the same language, aren't you? And you can make adjustments for each other, and on that kind of real primitive like nervous system level, like how what each other needs.
Yeah, certainly. And it can explain, not an excuse, it can explain behavior. And then that can be described and explained. And that can be very healing rather than layering on shame and the inner critic firing up and getting in the way. Amazing. I could talk to you about all that all day as well. So let's
I
move on.
know, I know.
So just very lightly, because this will come up in the next questions, but are there key struggles and blocks that you see people coming to you with from the ND community? Are you seeing the same things? I don't like to lead the witness by saying RSD and sharing about who they are, but is it widespread, or are you seeing patterns?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I post about the themes and things all the time. But I think the kind of big ones that I see are, well, themes around systems that we belong to, the education
Mhm.
system, medical systems, like not being able to access getting an assessment for many, many years, or, parents whose neurodivergent children can no longer attend school because of the system they belong to, and they're on their knees because they've been excluded from education, so yeah, that those kinds of themes. But I think in terms of like therapeutic work, big ones that resonate and come out all the time is shame. Internalized shame is probably underpins almost every client I see, for sure. I think, identity, who am I, where am I going, who have I been, what's the meaning of everything, like who am I, who do I want to be, where am I going, all of those kinds of questions. And I think those kinds of things in therapy are really important, because what I see a lot of is clients whose identities are very fragmented, because they don't know who they are necessarily, because they've spent many years kind of just camouflaging and trying to blend in with different situations, blending in with friendship
Mhm.
groups or work or school. And then I think the impact of that is that you don't fully know what you believe or what you think. And coming to therapy, and I'll be like, okay, so how do you feel about that, or how what sense do you make of that? And they're like, I don't know. I genuinely, they're stuck because their identity has been pulled in so many different directions over the years. They don't quite know who they are. So I think, yeah, that's definitely a theme that comes through all the time. And the other thing as well, I'd say, for me, the theme for me as a therapist is about self-compassion. It's about, okay, how can we start to develop a language of self-compassion, because these people have never been shown compassion, or very little. And we live in a world now, don't we, that's not that compassionate to difference. So a big part of what I do and strive to do is to model compassion, and compassion for them and compassion for myself. If I make a mistake, or if I say something that maybe hasn't landed well, I'll be like, hey, you know what? That's not quite how I meant it. And we'll talk about that. And you know what I mean? So modeling compassion is such an important part of the therapeutic work I do with ND clients.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's interesting. It's kind of like you say, these fragmented parts of us, especially at all of the shows. I call them shows. I put on a show,
Mm.
in certain situations, because it's actually really hard to be in a certain environment. So you put on a show. Obviously, it wipes you out, but also who you think you should be. So that's the big thing with me. It's a 42-year-old man. It's not who I am, because I'm not not symptoms. You know what I mean? I'm not what presents necessarily. but based on my nervous system state in any given time. Sympathetic dorsal is going to look different. But then there's who I think I should be. What does a 42-year-old man look like? In our last episode, Philippa, me and Louise were having a lot of fun about how we do not feel our age. You know, I look at a 42-year-old bloke, a dad in the school playground, like that's a grown up. That's a grown up guy. And they say there's a delay potentially for neurodivergent people, but it's only maybe 7 years. So that doesn't really track because that's 35. But it's interesting how, because of the presentations I'm actually quite fond of, the silliness, the energetic nature, the creativity, which means I relate really well with children. I'm very imaginative, but there's part of me that feels like, no, I should be a stern, professional man working in a high corporate job. And I think there's also that as well. You're having to compare yourself to a neurotypical, in inverted commas, bloke. So yeah, what are your thoughts there? There's that whole other part, which is this is who Owen should be. And that's actually quite debilitating at times.
Yeah. Oh God, I had that for years. So I can't tell you, like for about 15 years, 20 years of my adult life, I should be at this point by now. And the should is another thing that comes through in therapy. It's a manifestation of the shame, isn't it? That I should
Yeah.
be at this point and I'm not, and I'm going to shame myself for that. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I'm turning 40 next year, and I've only just carved out what feels like a career, because my ADHD has taken me down so many rabbit holes, so many different places that I've wanted to have a million different identities and do a million different things, and I probably still could go and have that hyper focus with all of them if I wanted to, but this is where my passion lies, and this is what I believe I'm good at. So yeah, but that feeling of I should be here, I should be doing this. And I wonder as well if, we're a similar generation, that, being a millennial, like at school, it was very much like, it was quite traditional, sort of, you have traditional career paths. You would be a teacher or a doctor, or, you would be a sort of an occupation, and you would go to university and you would follow those trajectories. And if you deviate from that in any way, then there's something's up, right? And I think now there's so much scope for kids now to just kind of do whatever they want to do, wherever their interests lie. You don't have to take that traditional pathway. And that takes the shame out of just being who you want to be in an authentic way.
Yeah, it sure does. And I think this generation coming through, I would love to know if like the entrepreneurial spirit is so much more accepted now, what
Mm.
that looks like, the ability to go and do whatever course you want, go to college, do an open university degree in your 40s, like I did with my graphic design, is just there's so much more access to many more ways of bringing in income. Even if people want to go down the Bitcoin route, I don't understand what any of it is, but people go down that way as well. And I think I'm really excited for that generation, especially neurodivergent people who may lean towards entrepreneurship. The world is ish ready for them to find their own path. I'm so excited for them. And we're entrepreneurs as well. So we're leading the charge for late diagnosed, and not late diagnosed, but diagnosed older people
Yeah.
and entrepreneurs. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's exciting. I think, watching the fact, all you need really to start a business is an idea and a phone, that's it.
Yeah.
And if that's what, a 21-year-old wants to do when they leave school, I fully back that, So those routes and those pathways have changed. And I think that, yeah, hopefully removes a lot of those shoulds that we grew up with in our generation.
Definitely. I think, yeah, the should thing, I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. It's a big part of the human experience because the society has laid out a pathway that we're all supposed to follow. So I don't think that's going anywhere either, in many ways. So yeah, very, very powerful. We had talked about this a little bit earlier on. We'll just touch on it one more time. I kind of wanted to put this to bed at this point because covered it so many times, which is counseling over here, coaching over here.
Mm.
How do they blend? Should they be separate? The forwardness and the take doing exercise and tasking to change your life going forward with coaching, and then the processing, what's happening with your life in the counseling sense, and getting to know who you are on the deep level. For me, I think there might be a place for both of them to really powerfully allow people to process and proactively move forward. And I don't know how that sits if you don't have both sets of training. What are your thoughts on all of it? It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I completely agree actually. I do feel like that is the thing that's missing from my toolbox at the moment. Because I think sometimes in counseling you can reach a point where you've processed everything to death, right? You've processed, things that have happened in your life, your identity, you've been going for a long time, and then it's kind of like, right, so what next? And that's the bit. I mean, there's huge overlap between them. So I do kind of naturally feel like with some clients, with some issues that they bring, I naturally fall into a more of a kind of coaching type therapy, if that makes sense. So we'll focus more on the present day, what certain tasks might look or feel like, what would allow you to be able to do that, what kind of narrative are you hearing when you're doing that. And so I do find myself leaning into that a lot. So I actually think I think they need to coexist actually. And I particularly with neurodivergence, because I think there are a lot of people who want to learn new ways of doing things, want to develop new habits, new systems, and they're stuck with that. And that's where I think coaching can really facilitate that. And then if you're trained in both, then you can obviously kind of work through those perhaps past ghosts that are holding someone back, the trauma or whatever it might be that's blocking someone from moving forward, and seamlessly kind of blending them. So yeah, 100%. I think that they absolutely need to coexist for sure.
Yeah, certainly, like with self-worth, if you don't think you're worthy of a certain thing, you're not going to take action to build something where you think you're not going to get there anyway. What's the point?
Yeah.
That's fine. You can work around the thoughts around that and the emotional connection to the thoughts. But where did it even, who is saying that? Is it a mum? Is it a dad? Is it a coach in school? Is it from bullying? You need to like be able to heal the information that was given to you that you've absorbed as truth. So it's I know it's really exciting. I think a lot of people probably, well, I've met a lot of people do both. I think that's brilliant. But they all say, actually, this counselor I had, she was amazing or he was amazing, where it was just the right amount of moving forward and just the right amount of that. So I think just go out, research, find your person. At the end of the day, the therapeutic relationship is number one over anything else. If you do not feel safe, you are not going to be able to move forward and integrate
Oh,
everything you need to do. It's huge.
yeah.
Amazing. So yeah, it'll come up again, guys, but I won't spend too long on it because we covered it so much. So, what are your thoughts on how NDers can work with emotions and the relationship with their own life experiences? Okay, we talk about this a lot, but let's keep going. So, how can we work with the emotions, our relationship, um, with how they impact our experience of life? I don't know. There's a lot of bottom, it's a top-down kind of
Mm.
world out there, and I'm just really, really keen to get as many people's opinion on this about bottom up and how important it is to understand our emotions over anything else sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And well, as a therapist, my stance on emotions is they are the barometer of what's going on for you, and the thing is that a lot of the time we don't always know what we're feeling, there's that sort of like something's up, there's a delay sometimes, I don't know if you know about alexithymia, but like sometimes as well, not being able to name emotions or not being able to identify, or a delay in identifying emotions. And that's something that I definitely experience. I will find myself in a really dysregulated, grumpy state, and then not know why. And then someone will point out, well, are you okay? I'm like, and no, I'm not. And then I'll kind of reflect on what's happened. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm feeling really, sad, or and I haven't spotted it. It's come out in a very physical sort of manifestation of maybe sort of anxiety in my body, or there'll be something, there's a something, there's a clue, but it's not an emotion right away. That has to be processed in a cognitive way. Like I have to be like, oh, I'm feeling something, and I have to notice it and pay attention to it, and then I can work through it.
Yeah, it's kind of the sense of becoming aware of the different states and emotions your body goes through in different environments. It's kind of being an inner coach sort of started to unpack that over time. But you really have to be kind of your own advocate here, a really compassionate advocate, a compassionate witness of these things that arise. And so often, if we become, say, angry and frustrated and stressed, um, we think, okay, that would look like, lots of physical activity in sort of like, getting frustrated and angry and stressed, and in the sense of the way you're behaving, the way you're moving, the way you're eating, the way you're all of these things that it causes. But actually, so often we will suppress that and it will become dorsal. So I always talk in polyvagal terms, but we'll be in our dorsal vagal. So that's shut down. So
Yeah.
we'll be depressed and we'll lack motivation and we'll feel really flat. And they'll think, oh, I'm depressed. I'll have antidepressants. When so much of it can be chronic stress and frustration with something or fear would put you in dorsal anyway, but it's kind of understanding the difference that that isn't the primary issue. Dorsal is actually the response of you protecting yourself. And it's easy for me to say that because I listen to this stuff all day and research it, and I'm sure the same is for you and training. But trying to explain that to people, I guess, is you've got to take it slow and steady, haven't you, to how to understand what these maps are, these
Yeah,
emotional maps.
yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I think one like what I like to do when I kind of first start with new clients is to show them the window of tolerance, which is based on the exact same thing as what you're saying with polyvagal. It's that visual aid, isn't it? You know, of being able to look at, okay, where am I? Or you've got the zones of regulation as well, which is another one. But the window of tolerance, I really like that one because it's used in trauma therapy quite a lot, and there's that overlap between them, you know. So I think that just giving people the terminology and the vocabulary is such a great place to start, to be able to say, oh, I'm dysregulated, whereas before they might not have even known what that was, or they might have heard it but don't really know how that applies to them. So yes, psychoeducation, showing people the window of tolerance, you know, saying, where are you in this today, right now in the session, or where are you, how have you been in the last month? And if you've been permanently in a state of hyper arousal, that might explain why you're heading towards burnout, you know. So it's kind of like giving people the terminology and the vocabulary to empower them to know what's happening in their body, to know what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's I think that's the whole point. I think it's the whole role of a lot of the therapeutic work out there is to help people get there because you don't really know for sure what's happening. And the book would tell us it's probably quite likely that. But it's knowing what is missing in a way that's causing all the things that follow that, all the ways you're coping, all the way your body's coping that you're unaware of. As we see on the show, your body and your brain, it doesn't really know what's real or not real. You're kind of having to interact with the experience to say, hey, no, it's cool, we got this. And becoming like your best friend and befriending your nervous system, as they were saying, polyvagal. And for example, Philippa, I had a testosterone test the other day. We're going to do a whole episode on it because for ND men, it's quite common for our testosterone to be insanely low, especially when you hit your 40s.
Mm,
Mine is very, very low, which
mm,
means I am using cortisol and stress hormone to function a lot of the time. Can you imagine what a toll that's taken on my nervous system? So if I fix my testosterone like my friend is doing with replacement therapy, he says he feels like $1 million. You know, he can't believe it.
mm.
And that
Yeah.
means he's going to be dropping out of the stress hormone response, and then he's going to be able to flourish more. And I think you don't really know until you dive deeper, even if it's in a medical way like that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because that, you know, that interaction, I think for some reason, like, I don't know, 200 years ago or something, the brain and the body got separated in science. I don't know why. I'm sure there's a reason why they were separated.
Yeah.
But we're now piecing them back together again and going, oh, hold on a minute. My brain is in charge of all my bodily functions, right? So they're not separate. They're totally one system. And it's only in the last sort of, you know, I don't know, 20, 30 years that in psychology, we've been joining them back up again. Like I did my psychology degree not that long ago, and they were, I can count on one hand the amount of times we talked about the body. It was the brain, the brain, the brain, and it was all about the brain. And the body is just completely discarded to one side, you know, like a an add-on or something.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think that's why some of the training I've done recently, I've been loving because it's had the perfect blend.
Mm.
I think maybe, I'm doing interpersonal neurobiology with Daniel Siegel at the moment, so that's
Mm.
hardcore brain, and then obviously polyvagal training I want to do as well. So it's a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can talk to you all day about that too. We're seeing a theme here, but I want to make sure we cover something that I know you're very passionate about, which is misophonia. So since speaking to you about it, I've been looking it up and understanding more about it. But tell us more about what misophonia is, why it's something that is very aware to you, and maybe you're seeing with clients. But yeah, let's dive into that because I think we've not talked about it at all yet in 50 episodes. So here's your chance.
That doesn't surprise me that it's not come up because it is much lesser known neurodivergent trait. But incidentally, when I talk to neurodivergent people, they all seem to know what I'm talking about, which, you know, like misophonia. Oh yeah, the noise sensitivity. Yeah, I've got that. So people within our community absolutely know what it is. They might not know what it's called or, that there's a term for it, but they will usually identify with it in some way. So yeah, I'm kind of banging the drum, raising awareness about it. I found out about it about 15 years or so ago, just purely incidentally. Got talking to an audiologist about something who she mentioned it and she was like, "Oh yeah, misophonia." And I'm, "Miss a what?" And she said, "Yeah, misophonia, that's the sensitivity to sounds that you're talking about." And I was like, "What? This has a name?" I thought I was just
Mm.
absolutely mad. Again, was never a part of that initial kind of assessment that I had as a kid, but I had it all my life. It was there and probably was, part of the autistic profile, like manifesting itself in that way. And lumped under a sort of general sensory thing. But it's not, it's a discrete thing. It's not hyperacusis, which is a sensitivity to or a pain when you hear a loud noise and you get that pain. It's not that. And it's not just a sensory overwhelm from sound. It's an extreme anxiety and reaction, internal reaction to regular everyday noises, with the caveat it's usually a human sound. Not always, but mostly. It's, a coughing, breathing, chewing, those kinds of human made noises are the biggest triggers. And yeah, so with misophonia, I think, yeah, it's about raising awareness, because I think that a lot of neurodivergent people experience this and privately struggle with it, and there's a lot of shame associated with it. And that's something I want to kind of try and address. And just again, like everything neurodivergent, it's about that internal shame. And the more we shine a spotlight onto something, the less darkness it has to simmer away in.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm glad you clarified that too, because many people think, oh, it's a sensory thing. So is that the same as um, visual stuff or patterns? Is it the same with texture of foods? But I think it's really important to make sure we don't just bundle them all together as some sensory profile thing, which is really important too. But I'm sure misophonia could be a big part of that. And it's interesting you said that about, yeah, about people, in fact, because curveballing around here, but solitude's come up a lot in the last 10 episodes. How much people actually enjoy solitude, not loneliness or being alone. Solitude's completely different.
Yeah,
It can be a very beautiful thing.
yeah,
And
definitely.
I do wonder if some of that solitude is that we've known over time that if we spend too much time with people, the thing you're talking about, misophonia, becomes a real issue. And it actually will maybe over time make us really, what's the right word, against the other person, kind of seeing them differently over time. And it can really affect relationships and friendships as well, I suppose. So it's knowing where the need for solitude's coming from. And I guess some people might not know it's this, I guess, maybe.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, because misophonia is a neurodivergent trait, I don't know for sure. I haven't got statistics on it, and there's very little research. So the empirical evidence behind misophonia is so small, right? It's really, really tiny. I don't know, but I would lay money that almost anybody who has misophonia has an overlapping other neurodivergence, such as ADHD, autism. It will be a part of that. So maybe that's why it hasn't been kind of listed as a discrete thing in the DSM, because it's seen as as part of that, a bit like demand avoidance is seen as part of the autistic profile rather than its own kind of discrete entity. So it might be that, but yeah, for sure, I think there will be a lot of people who avoid social interactions, not because they don't want to see friends, but because if you're meeting in a restaurant, and you're autistic or you're ADHD or ADHD, there'll be the sensory stuff anyway going on. But then if you've got misophonia as well, you've got to navigate another layer, which is I can hear all the banging and clattering of the plates and the dishes and everybody talking and the music that's playing. So I'm processing that. Plus, I'm also processing the loud chomping that's happening over there, and I'm also trying to process the taste in my mouth, the texture of the. It's a lot. It's a real. You can imagine how quickly that could send someone into hyperarousal, right? And fight or flight. The nervous system suddenly going to be going, "Oh, what's happening? I need to leave, withdraw, and shut down."
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think processing is a great word. You know, there's so many processes happening in our bodies, systems having to do their thing. And when you're divergent, so often those things are struggling to process at a traditional speed that we might see in a neurotypical. So it's really interesting. And I think, would you say with this as well that it's certain sounds and pitches that are more impactive than others? I only say that because my partner's going for an autism assessment now. There's certain sounds that I make. She's like, please God, stop doing that. But then there's other things. She goes, you can do that. So I'll say, what about this? She goes, that's fine. But there's one, it's a bit like when I call my cat, I'll be like, that's sort of like really tight lip
Yeah,
thing. She cannot stand it. It makes her skin crawl. But if I do some other noise, like clock, 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 clock or something, she's fine.
yeah,
So it might not be misophonia, obviously, but it's so obvious in her that it's very specific
yeah.
bodily sounds.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are, I mean, everybody that has misophonia or identifies with it will have their own set of trigger sounds. You know, they'll be unique to them. And this is where the interesting bit comes in for us when we're talking about trauma, is that the kind of earliest or kind of the only studies really that are out there on misophonia are around trauma, and that it might have a relationship with early trauma. I know from my experience that there is a definite point in time in history when I was a kid where noises were seen as threats. So
Mm.
I wonder if that was internalized in some way, already being hypersensitive as a neurodivergent child to sounds, but then it got ramped up to a new level with the added layer of trauma. And so the kind of studies that have been done, they're really small, but they're sort of suggesting that EMDR could be helpful for misophonia, which suggests there is a potential relationship with trauma. So yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying, and that nuance as well of some sounds and not others.
True. Yeah. Thank you for adding in that element of the trauma as well, because I think taking in a neurodivergent brain and body just fresh out the packet sort of thing,
Yeah.
and then chuck life at that thing for years and years and years. And, you know, we've done loads of trauma stuff on this show already. And it's been so, so powerful and very, very popular. People are always trying to figure out which one's which. And I think maybe going on that journey of which one's which is actually problematic as well, because you just need to look at your holistic experience of life and how to
Yes.
address it. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? All of these branches off from RSD, misophonia, PDA, and how they kind of all just sort of go off in different directions. But I think that's because all of us in the community, as big groups of us, experience one very specific thing that really, really impacts our life. And having an understanding of what that looks like and a list and a description, what that looks like, I think is actually very helpful. Doesn't mean we have to pathologize everything and say, I have this list of names. I have rejection sensitive dysphoria. I have misophonia. We need to avoid doing that. But actually, it's actually quite useful, isn't it? To be able to
Yeah.
bundle it and make sense of it in a little package, maybe.
Absolutely. And you know, something that I think a lot about and talk a lot about with my clients is that what other labels have you had in your life before you had those labels? You know, you would have been called difficult, drama queen, you know, demanding, you know, all the other negative labels that would have been slapped on you maybe before you knew you were neurodivergent. You would have you've carried those labels for years, whatever they may be. And so if having another label or a different label, an alternate, it's not even a label, is it? It's an explanation, like you said earlier
Yeah.
in the session, that it's an explanation. And yes, okay, some people might call it a label, but I think it's a label that it's almost like a guidebook, you know, has been handed to you. Here's a little pamphlet with this name on it. Go away and go and research it. And then you can either use that to do nothing with, or you can go and completely empower yourself and understand yourself. So I think that's the difference, isn't it? You know, yes, they're labels, but they allow you to develop yourself and self-reflect and personal growth rather than being slapped a load of labels that are just unkind and damage your sense of self.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's once you have that label, then you can use the language you want to use from there on. I always think that's really, neuroaffirming, just being able to go off and say, okay, cool. Like for me, it's just talk, I just fascinated by the brain and nervous system. So I just talk about my experience of life just through that. So my nervous system gets very overstimulated by that. So I
Mm.
don't use any neurodivergent words. That's just language I like to use because I'm fascinated by my own nervous system. I'm like, what's it up to now? And then helping it through. So I love that. The befriending, guys. I love the word befriending. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Befriending what we're experiencing. So as we sort of get towards our last two beautiful questions, questions of all around hope and moving forward, our last question is kind of how can we steady ourselves long term with our sensitivities to stimulus and our own internal experiences, especially emotional ones? That's a massive question. Um, but it's all about steadying ourselves. What are your thoughts there about how we can, we talked about it today, working with what arises. Um, and where does this steadiness stem from? What do we need to kind of do first? A few things we need to do, maybe that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think, it depends where you're at in your journey, I suppose. So what I might do to steady myself might be different to some of my clients who are brand new to therapy and have never and are new to this world. But I think the big thing really is tuning into your body and tuning in and paying attention. I say this all the time to my clients, but start paying attention to what thoughts are happening and what are you doing when you're doing that, what thoughts are you having, and noticing. It's that act stuff, isn't it? About let's notice non-judgmentally what is coming up for me and pay attention, bring it back to the next session. Let's start talking about those things. And it's, once you start noticing as a kind of first step, is that mindful, I'm just thinking about what's coming up for me. I don't have to do anything with it. That's a part of it. The other thing that I especially with ADHD, I think that was quite important is buying yourself time. Impulsivity for me is a big thing. I always used to be so impulsive. I would just send a message or say something or do something, and it got me into so much trouble on so many occasions. And I've really learned the hard way that I have to pause. I just tell myself I'm not dealing with it, because there was a part of me that was always kind of like, no, you have to deal with it right now. It's really urgent. And I would now I'm like, no, it's
Mhm.
okay. I'm gonna just note that to myself, or even send myself a message, or put it in my notes about that, and let myself sit with it for a bit, because I guarantee if I can sit with it for 6 hours and go back to it, I will not react in the same way. And that has been a game changer for me. So learning regulation strategies to just buy myself a bit of time, to allow myself to make the choices that I want to make, not ones that are dictated by my impulsive nature.
Yeah, thank you. And it kind of touches nicely on what do we need in this moment? This is what I like to ask myself when something comes up and it's a sensation or a nervous system experience. What do I need? And the more I do that, the more I discover all these cool ways I could do it. And then it's go, no, that's no good. That's no good. Oh, actually, there's three or four things that interchange. And then building that up is actually quite a powerful tool. Do I need to ground my feet in the floor? Do I need to follow my breath? Do I need to go for a walk outside? Do I need water? I'm a big water guy. If I get water, put my hands in a bowl of water. It's a game changer. It grounds me. Do I actually just need to like disrupt my brain just for 10 minutes before I deal with anything else? Do I need to watch a bit of football or watch a movie or who cares? Whatever you need, as long as it's healthy and it's not upsetting anybody, do it. And then the more you do that, the more you get to get a better sense of what you need in any given moment. And like you said, there is knowing, okay, I'm quite impulsive. So what could I do? What buffers could I put in? What scaffold holding can I provide for myself? Sorry, guys, I'm using so much lingo from training stuff. But it's true. If you're impulsive responding to messages, or you have this, I need to respond. I feel terrible if I don't respond. They're going to hate me if I don't respond. I always say, well, did you maybe, why don't you, this is what I do, why don't you message them quickly and say, thank you so much for your message. I'm going to respond to you tomorrow. I'm going to respond to you soon. And they're like, okay, no worries. Then it's all gone. But we don't think that that's the thing you can do. It's just to say,
That's
speak
the
to, isn't it?
people pleasing part, isn't it, that comes out often, is that we feel we have to do, in some instances, respond straight away, or whatever it might be. Or it might be that, you've felt hurt by someone, and something that you've perceived, and that RSD kicking in. And that's so important as well, because both of those things, RSD and kind of people pleasing, they're often flip sides of the same coin. And we need to sit in that kind of gray area in the middle, which is so uncomfortable and so unfamiliar. But for me, I feel like that's where growth really lies, in those grey areas in the middle that are not clear to us.
Certainly. And I tell you what, when you put boundaries in, it is a game changer. Oh my God. Because then you say, I'm worthy of a boundary. And then you start to build that up. It's not easy. And maybe that's why we do need coaches and counselors and therapists to help us through that, because it's not easy and it's very hard to do it by yourself. Maybe a friend or a loved one who's also neurodivergent who gets it. That's quite good as well. But I just think as you get to know yourself better and you get to see the whole map of how you experience life, that's kind of 101, I think, for starting to feel better in ourselves.
Yeah.
So amazing. That's a whole episode as well. So Philippa will be on the next, will be in 8 episodes next year, to cover everything. But yeah, like I said, I could talk all day, but I really like to finish the show. Thank you so much for being here. Finish the show with these two key questions. So this is new. I've only had 4 people ask it. I can't wait to hear your answer. So ask every guest, what is a key moment or an achievement or a phase of your life or a period of your life that you're most proud of, considering a neurodivergence could have got in the way or it did get in the way, but you still did it. And you're like, I can't believe I did that, considering all of the
Mm.
barriers that were in my way.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, I can think of a couple, but I think probably the most recent one is my counseling training for sure. I mean, it was brutal, absolutely brutal. But I did exactly what I've just said I did. I sat in that grey area, and that's where I learned to sit with my own um, discomfort. I learned that for the first time. It's a skill. It's not something that I learned as a child. It's not something that I learned until much later. So being able to sit in the unknown and the discomfort and to make mistakes and kind of have to sit with them and you know really had to dig deep into my resources to finish that training. It was so not academically it was quite straightforward. It wasn't that taxing. It was the interrelational, personal, neuro non-neuro affirming kind of space,
Mm,
lots of kind of very strong personalities all clashing and not really kind of understanding, and all you've got everyone's trauma kind of sitting in a room together and you're working through it, and it's really tough. So I wouldn't want to put anybody off the training, but I'd say that for me is a key moment. When I finished that, I was like, I've done it. I tried
mhm.
for over a decade on 3 different occasions to complete the training in different places in different ways at different levels, and I finally did it. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. That's so powerful. Like you said, the structures, the layout of it all, the human interaction that's involved, the emotional intensity, these things that people, if you break it all down like that, you can see where you may be okay and where bits you may need some support. But yeah, these moments are just really show that, it's something you really want to do clearly, and ND or otherwise, you were going to get there. But it doesn't always turn out that way for everybody. But yeah, I'm hearing that quite a lot now, is the studying aspect, but it's probably because I have coaches and therapists on the show,
Yeah.
so they're probably going to be saying that, aren't they? How I did my first year of my graphic design degree, I do not know. Like you said, it nearly killed me. Just oh my God, my brain could the pro. I clearly there's some dyslexia happening, so I'm going to go off and find out about that because those essays, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
horrific.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that because I hadn't studied anything properly for 10 years like that. So, but we've got to try. Amazing. Anyway, it's not about me. This is your parting message of hope. We've been doing this since day one, Philip, and it's so gorgeous and beautiful and amazing. So this is your chance to give all the NDers listening your message of hope about how everything's going to be okay. We can do this, and we're beautiful beings. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. What would be your wording?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're living in really very troubled times, and and waking up on the news this morning and reading about what Trump is saying about autistic people and things like that. And I know how that lands with me. I can only imagine how it lands with many clients and potential clients. And I guess my message would be around find your tribe, find the people that accept you wholeheartedly, find the people that champion you, that people that love you even when you mess up. That's what got me through my training was having allies, having people that stood by me and got me and accepted me, and actually really liked some of my quirks and my personality features. So yeah, find the people, whether that's through a local support group or just having a counselor. You don't underestimate the power of having 1 hour a week to yourself with a neuroaffirming practitioner, whether that's a coach, a counselor, whatever that looks like, who models that self-compassion, who's neurodivergent just like you, who goes, you know what, I've lived a very similar path, not the same, but I get it. And I'm championing you quietly on the sidelines. I think that would be my message.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I was thinking about Trump stuff today. I think at the end of the day, people are going to try and put us back 10 years in what we're learning about this. So just let's all just stick together. We know what the truth is, and we're all beautiful people who all support each other in the community. Like you said, it's perfect. It's perfect timing for it. We can all come together and know what is authentically true to the whole community. So we got this, guys. No matter what anyone tries to say or do to us, we got this because we are social justice warriors. To be a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we are probably the right people for it because I've got a strong sense of that as well. Amazing.
Too.
Beautiful. I've loved this. I felt this was fantastic. We have covered quite a lot, and I hope it's enough of each bit for everybody to enjoy. People, pretty much everybody's come back on at this point, so I really look forward to it if it feels right for you to have you back on, and we can dive into things in more detail. But in the meantime, where can we find you? Where's your main social media place? Where can we get in contact? How can people work with you, really?
Yeah, so you can find me through my website, which is www.flourish-counselling.co.uk. And you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is flourish underscore with underscore Philippa.
Amazing stuff. I'll put it all in the show notes, everybody, as always. But yeah, one last time, thank you so much. I've really loved getting to know you off this as well, and the support you give me on my journey into becoming a coach in the space as well. I'm really looking forward to talking more. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved chatting with you, Owen. So thank
Mhm.
you. I hope to see you again.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time for more exploration of neurodivergence.